250 years ago on this day, my Marine Corps came alive. I gotta apologize about my hands. Somebody made a comment in the past about my hands being annoying. It's the Marine Corps knife hands. Marine Corps birthday, 250th this year. It's always easy for me to remember because it is my age plus 200. But on this very special episode, homesteaders, preppers, prepper setters, I'm gonna just give you my boot camp story. Kind of like this is my rifle. There are many like it, but this one is my own. There are many boot camp stories, but this one is my own. I'm gonna try to make it brief because I could go, the stories and memories are still there like yesterday. But from the beginning, the Marine Corps had a minimum weight standard of around 120 pounds. At my enlistment, I was like 105. I was like really underweight. And I don't even know why I wanted it. Long story why I went, but I always wanted to be in the military, but you know, high school changes, you get into skateboarding, girls, things like that. And then just like those movies where it's prison or the military, I was at that point. It wasn't prison, but it was, I barely graduated high school. I was a horrible kid, just in trouble, I needed the Marine Corps. So with the approval of my guidance counselor, because my recruiter came to school to help me push me through graduation, they told the guidance counselor that if they graduated me, I would go to boot camp. So they pushed me on through. I ate all summer long, as much as I could, and then I went to boot camp, still underweight. But I think at that time I was 110 maybe. I was pretty proud of that 110 because I had to gain some weight. I remember getting to boot camp, you know. I remember the flight. My parents left me. I had a packet, got on the plane. There was a bunch of other guys with the same packet. We're all on the plane together. And I always remembered, my father told me, have fun the summer before you go to boot camp and just enjoy life. They'll teach you everything you need to know. Don't even worry about it. These guys were talking about general orders, how they know this, that, and they are asking me like general orders, and I said, I have no idea, and they were laughing at me, like straight up laughing at me and telling me I'm gonna have a horrible time, I'm gonna not make it, I'm not gonna cut, you know, and I'm just like, holy cow, I'm like, boot camp hasn't even started, and I'm getting ripped apart by these guys on this plane that I don't even know. And I always remembered that, because these guys were bigger than me, and I'm just like, wow, I'm like literally the smallest dude on this plane. No big deal. I remember we landed in San Diego. I went to San Diego MCRD, not Paris Island. San Diego was males only, and in my mind, a little bit different. We get off the plane. I'm just kind of moping off the plane with all the other guys, and all of a sudden, there was a drill instructor in the airport yelling at us to line up in front of other people, and we lock up to attention, and they're yelling at us and he's marching us through the airport. And I always remembered, to this day, just like yesterday, you know, marching through the airport, scared out of my mind, because, you know, at the time I was 19, just turned 19. I actually went on my 19th birthday, believe it or not, because the scheduling changed. So it was my birthday. And I remember we went past this family. It was a husband, wife, and kids. And he looks at us and looks at his wife and goes, there goes more of America's future a-holes. He didn't say a-holes, he said in front of his family, and I'm just like, what did I, you know, I'm straight-faced as can be, and I'm just like, whoa, I wasn't expecting that. You know, I thought everybody liked Marines, you know. This was in 1994, so just to give you an example of time frame. And then we get on the bus, and I don't even remember anything on that bus. I just remember it being dark. It was pitch black out. I don't know if it was in the morning or late at night. It was just, I was freaked out. And then I remember the bus stops, drill instructor gets on, just starts screaming at all of us and telling us to get in those yellow footprints. We get off the bus, you find those yellow footprints, and that's that moment where you're like, oh crap, I am here. I am here. This is real. And the next thing you know, it was just doing uncomfortable things, getting yelled at, formations, you know, getting haircuts, stripping down naked, getting issued everything new, you know, just this whole, I believe that first day it was like 24 hours without any sleep, just this whole in-processing in there. And then I remember we get a platoon, we have a drill instructor, and it was almost very relaxing. Like, he was really nice, teaching us how to make our racks, just kind of going over the basics. We went to the chow hall, you know, doing a little bit. I'm like, oh, this isn't bad at all. This is pretty easy. And then I remember that night, that drill instructor getting us all in a little group formation in the barracks going, are you guys scared? Tomorrow you get your real drill instructors. And I'm just like, what was this guy? You know, what was this? You know, I thought this was the drill instructor. I didn't know anything about the military. That next day when we got our real drill instructors, still can I remember that to this day. We're sitting on formation on the ground on the quarterdeck in the barracks. And all of a sudden they have these swinging doors and the doors kick open and these 3 Marines just come marching in, the most solid, just, you know, pivoting, you know, doing their pivots, locking in front of, you know, in front of us. And I remember, it's still a blur, but I remember somebody saying, you know, make them, and they just, next thing you know, that guy who was taking care of us for those first couple days left. These 3 drill instructors were there. Then the main drill instructor was in front. They got in front of him. They saluted him, and he just said, make them into Marines. And the next thing you know, they're just going off on all, I mean, just, I've never seen so much chaos in my life. Our belongings thrown on the floor, foot lockers being kicked. It's kind of funny to this day because one of the drill instructors kicked one of the foot lockers and it went flying like far. And then I didn't realize it then, but he was gone for a couple days because he hurt his foot really bad. These guys were just ripping into us, screaming at us, yelling at us. It was like Full Metal Jacket. They were just in our face, you know, this. And I still remember that very first night, just freaking out, like freaking the heck out. And we had to line up tallest to shortest all the time. So I was always at the end, at the very end. And then plus my last name. We're there, I'm at the very end, and the drill instructors are literally going one by one through everybody. And then at the very beginning, we did do the sir sandwich, the sir, yes, sir. And then they changed it to no sir sandwiches where it was just yes, sir. But I still remember the senior drill instructor and the 2 heavies came in front of me, and the senior drill instructor just started laughing and saying, what do we have here? You go, what are you, a buck 05? And I remember saying, sir, no, sir, this recruit is 109 pounds, sir, with the straightest face as can be, because I was proud that I put on that weight. I've like never been that weight in my life. And I think he was trying to hold back, but he just laughed a little bit and just said, well, we'll take care of, we'll put some weight, you know, more or less, we'll put some weight on you. And the next thing you know, I was considered a double rat. They call it a double rat. You have to eat every meal, double rations. You get a special tag in your uniform. And this always makes me sad. The guys that were overweight, they, instead of putting a temporary tag, like I had a temporary tag that said double rat, they put red stripes on their uniform. And it was horrible. Like I remember that next breakfast with double rat, I got double everything, donuts, orange juice, milk, like the whole enchilada, you know, I'm just eating this all. The guys with the red stripes, toast, water, hard-boiled egg. And that was it. And I'm like just woofing this stuff down. And I didn't realize also, because I didn't really pay attention, I watched Full Metal Jacket like once, I didn't realize that you have your senior drill instructor and then 2 heavies. So you have 3 drill instructors. And the reason for it makes sense now, but back then you didn't understand, but they needed time off. They needed to recover because these guys, they were always 100% sharp, always. I remember one time, this is in the first week is horrible. After that first week, it gets tolerable and you can handle it. But that first week, they're screaming at you. I remember we're showering. They're like stripped down. You know, we're going through the showers, holding a towel in one hand, I think soap in their hand. They had all the showers running and we're just walking through in a formation. And the drill instructors are in there yelling at us in their service uniform, getting wet, everything, you know, just, and then they marched us onto the quarterdeck. And the next thing you know, they're like dry again and they're like perfect looking. And you're just like, what the heck, you know? And then as time went on, I became what was known as a house mouse. They usually pick the smallest person because, you know, the mouse. And the house mouse was the person who cleaned the drill instructor's hooch. So every morning we had to do field day. Every night we did field day. But my job was I went into, and that's the other thing, you could not say I, you had to say this recruit. So if you needed to use like the bathroom, you had to say, this recruit requests to make a head call, sir. You know, as that whole, but they came to me and they said, you know, recruit, you are a house mouse. And I didn't know what that was at first. And then, so once they told me what it was, every morning I had to go pound on the hatch, you know, and go in there and clean their room. And then once I was in there, I realized all these guys had literally like 10 of each uniform, all perfectly pressed, 10 pairs of boots, perfectly polished, like just, and what they would do is when they would yell at us in the shower and get wet, another one would come in and one would run back and change quickly. And then by the time we got out, they were just perfect. They were always perfect around us. Uniform, everything, just composure. It was just unbelievable. And what also got me is the size of the platoon. That first week, we had like 80 guys, 80 potential Marines, 80 people, 80 recruits that wanted to be Marines. And I still remember we had to do fire watch. You know, you always hear about it. Every hour on the hour, somebody has to be awake and walk around and do fire watch. It's just one of those boot camp things. I remember that first week after we got picked up by a real drill instructor, and I had to relieve this guy for fire watch. And I remember I get over there, and there's this guy, he's bigger than me. He's bawling, like straight up crying. And I always remember that because I am 110 pound, soaking wet. And he was just crying. And I'm like, hey buddy, you know, I'm like, I got to relieve you on, you know, whatever. I'm like, you can go to bed. But I'm like, what's wrong? I go, and he was just crying about boot camp. And I said, hey buddy, didn't you kind of expect this? I go, this, you know, I was like, it's not supposed to be easy, but it's saying, yeah, I didn't, it was completely not what I expected, but I knew it wasn't going to be good. And here's a guy, you know, bigger, tougher guy than me, bawling. And, you know, the next thing you know, the guy's gone. You know, the next week or that week or whatever, he just, and you started noticing the platoon size was shrinking. You didn't notice things right away, but, you know, it's just like the drill instructors were always there. Always there. Even those few times you think you could joke around with some of the guys, and next thing you know, the drill instructors were there. And they would just drop you to the quarterdeck, push-ups, flutter kicks, you know, to the point where you're almost going to puke. You know, back then they couldn't hit you, but you could walk into them and into their fist. So it was, the drill instructors used to always say they have a kill zone. You know, you just can't get within that. And if you were unlucky enough to get into that, you might walk into a fist. Yeah, it was, but you realize it now that everything that they were doing was to make you a Marine and a better person and to help you get through boot camp. They wanted you to succeed, but they would be tough on you. And if you weren't up to that level, they would make sure you were not there. Like they would get rid of you quick. I was amazed at how quickly they were getting rid of people. And it was one of those things like I didn't exercise, I didn't do anything. And I remember we had to do like a 3-mile run and it was just like horrible. I didn't know how to swim very good. I did horrible in the swimming, you know, but swimming and the rifle range is kind of dumb. I didn't realize marine, amphibious, swimming. Like I liked the water, going to the beach with the girls and stuff in high school. It was cool. I didn't really swim very good. So when I got there, it was like horrifying because here you're getting thrown into the water, all your clothes on, boots, a backpack, all this crap. And I was just freaking out. And it was interesting because about me and like 10, 15 guys did not pass the first, you had to do like 3 phases of swimming. And I didn't pass it the first time. I freaked out, whatever, in the water. And they put you in a remedial class and they literally were nice to you, instructed you, taught you how, you know, because they wanted you to pass the swimming. Swimming and rifle range, probably the most important things in the Marine Corps. You need to do those every year. So the other thing too was funny, when the drill instructors went around, they would ask you, what is your MOS? Because this is back in the period when you could pick your job and you're guaranteed contract as long as you can get it. And I was originally going to go in for microcomputer specialist or combat network. I was going to do computers because that was the wave of the future back then. I kick myself now for not doing that, but I saw this at the very last week before I went to boot camp. I saw this brochure that showed this Marine all decked out in like tactical gear on a ship, looking around, snooping around. And I asked my recruiter, I said, what is that? And he goes, oh, that's Combat Security Forces. That is the SWAT team of the Marine Corps. And I said, change me to that. Last minute, I changed to that. What he did not tell me is the prerequisite to that is you have to be an infantry Marine. So you have to go to the school, once you graduate boot camp, you have to go to the School of Infantry. And if you pass that, then you go to the Security Forces training. So when the drill instructors asked me, what is your MOS? I said, this recruit's MOS is Security Forces, sir. And then they all started laughing. Like, ah, they did that like, almost like that meme where the guy's like, ah, ha, ha. You know, they're all laughing like, ah, infantry, ha, ha, ha. And then they just walked away. And like, I didn't really get it. I mean, I knew so little of the military, and I was terrified every day that I was there. So it's like, I saw some movies recently. There's a new thing on Netflix, and it had some parallels to when I was there, but like in the Netflix film, they just had way too much free time. Maybe that was a Paris Island thing, you know, knock on Paris Island, but MCRD, we hardly had any free time, any free time. It was just, you were just constantly micromanaged. They were just constantly around you. You couldn't even, it was just rough. So from then on, you know, I just was like, okay, I got to go to infantry. I didn't really get it. And then as just time went on, you didn't realize you started gaining more weight. You started eating really fast because you had this other rivalry within the platoon of guys wanting to be squad leaders. So every squad leader wanted his squad to be done quicker than anybody else. So one of the advantages of being a double rat, when we lined up to eat, double rats got to the front. So we would have the maximum amount of time to eat. So, and then the guide would eat last. And the guide, I remember the guide and the squad leaders would eat last. I remember in my platoon, these squad leaders were like Grecian gods, you know, just 6 foot something ripped dudes. And I remember we would go into the chow hall. I would get in there first, just pile up all this food, and I would just start woofing it down. The guides would get in there, literally, and the squad leaders would get in there at the very end, and they would just drink some juice, eat some stuff, shove it down, and be like, we're done. And half my food wasn't even eaten. And I started to learn that. I'm like, these guys are just pricks. They want to look better. You know, I'm like, I didn't get the whole squad leader thing. I didn't care about honor man. All I wanted to do was make it through boot camp. But I was starving most of the time. So I learned to just start shoveling the food down, like just insanely shoveling it down. And then when we got mail, we would get packages. So it sounds, this is really derogatory though, but they would call us the double rats. And then the red stripers were fat bodies. It was, you gotta remember, it was Marine Corps. They're not there to, you know, they didn't promise you a rose garden. So, but what would happen is we would get mail. They'd let us get mail. And I remember one of the red stripers, their parents sent them some Little Debbies. They made them open the package, and then they said, I wasn't the only double rat. There was like 3 other guys that were double rats. They said, on the quarterdeck in front of everybody, they said, double rats. We had to come up there, and it was a box of Little Debbies, and they let the guy, I think, take like 1 bite, and then they gave us the rest of the box, and they made us eat it all, like all in that moment. We had to like woof down the whole thing. And then like everybody had to do push-ups and, you know, get yelled. I mean, it was just crazy, crazy, crazy. It was just such a, man, it's just the insanity there. And then you learn now too, looking back, there was a few weeks where no matter what you did, nothing was ever right. You would just get yelled at by the drill instructors. You'd get your gear tossed, your footlocker, you know, kicked over, your rack knocked over. I mean, just everything, and just chaos, you know, and then you learn that no matter what, you could have did everything right. It's just that period of training. They break you down. They break you down, and then they build you up. And then I remember at a point where that we had 80 people and we were down to like 50 something. And I'm like, you just don't realize it. You know, that one guy that was limping the one day is gone. The guy that was crying, you know, the other day was gone. The guy that was having a hard time with something else, just gone. The guys that didn't do good in the second phase of the swimming. You know, they didn't pass the second try. It was just so crazy. And I'm skipping so many things here. I'm kind of jumping forward, but you know. But I do remember there was even one point, because the big fear too was getting hurt. If you got hurt, you got sent back to, they call it like MRP. I don't even know what it stands for, but it was like a platoon of broken, hurt people. And they would rehabilitate you, and then eventually you'd get put back to a different platoon at the same phase where you got hurt. So some of these guys, you know, we're boot camp longest out of all the armed forces. Ours is 3 months. There were guys there for like 6 months that hurt themselves. So the one thing you never wanted to do was get hurt. And I remember guys, we had to climb the ropes all the time. He got to the top, which is a super achievement for him because he was a red striper and he could never do it. And when he got excited, he slapped the top and then slipped and grabbed the thing and burned his hands down the whole thing. I remember they put burn dressing on his hands and all, and he was like sucking it up because he did not want to go to the MRP, and he sucked it up. I remember I did something, I had when they issued my boots, I didn't realize they measured my feet. They give you 2 pairs of boots, your all leathers and then like jungle boots. When they measured my feet, I was supposed to be a wide width. I didn't catch that, so I got 1 pair of boots that were the wide width. The other pair was not, and it was standard width. So, and we had to wear those boots more often than the other boots. So I started getting one of my toes going numb. And it's kind of a crazy story. It was like 6 months after I graduated boot camp, I finally got feeling back in that toe. I actually had to take the insoles out of the boots to make them fit and suck it up. And then I hurt my knee really bad, climbing some obstacle or whatever. And I remember limping at one point, and the drill instructor came up to me. You know, they just kind of swarm. They see everything, and they're like, "You want to go to MRP? You want to go to MRP?" And I just said, you know, "No, sir. This recruit does not want to go to MRP," and just kind of sucked it up and stopped limping, even though it was excruciating pain. And I remember for a couple weeks, I would be asleep in the rack at night, and a drill instructor would come by and be like, throw a bag of ice on me, and that was his kind way of saying, "Ice your knee. Tomorrow's going to suck." And that went on for a while until the limp went away. At that age, you know, 18, 19, you could just get hurt and heal pretty quickly, unlike today. It was just such a culture shock though, too. Like I said, you know, the toilets, the bathrooms, you've got all these stalls with no walls whatsoever. So you got to go number 2, you got to go in front of, you know, a bunch of other guys. And there were guys that held it in for like a week. I mean, it was like, I was just one of those, like, I was scared, I didn't even care. It was just like, I was just like, you know, I'm here, I just go with the flow, just do whatever, you know. And it was so shocking because, like I said, I've never experienced anything like it in my life. You know, all those guys, I always laugh. There's all these guys, you get out and you talk to people and they're like, "Oh, drill instructor yells at me, I'm gonna get in his face." Never have I ever seen that once. It was amazing the fear that they could put into you. There were like guys that were like 6'6", you know, just big muscle guys that could have just, some of the drill instructors were not that big, and these guys could have literally just crushed the drill instructor. And just these drill instructors with their knife hands, just, you know, getting into your face, they would just literally put the fear into you. I mean, you just would almost freak out. Like there was times where you would have like 3 of them yelling at you, and then every once in a while, if you're like outdoors doing training, other drill instructors from other platoons would join in, and you could have like 5 drill instructors just surrounding you and just screaming at you, and you would just stand there and they're just like, "Ah," you know, yelling at you. It was one of those, you look at it now, it's kind of funny. And it's like, yeah. But man, at that time, it was just so shocking. But you were learning things as you went. Between the chaos and the confusion, you were learning things. You were learning how to drill, how to march, how to handle your rifle. You know, you're learning Marine Corps history, Marine Corps traditions. And the next thing you know, you're within, you know, a week to graduating, and you're just like, holy cow, how did this happen? You know, because it seems like you were there for like ever. And it just seemed like the longest time of my life. And the guys that you stuck around with, you saw those red stripe fat bodies just lose fat, and they're like trimmed down. The guys that had a lot of fat were just trimming down to almost nothing, and they had like skin hand. I mean, it was like insane because I had scabs on my butt from doing so many sit-ups, bruises everywhere. I mean, you'd get just kind of just tore up. And it was just crazy how the time went. And then when you went to the rifle range, they were nice again. They wanted you to learn. You know, next thing you know, we're shooting at 500 yards and we're making hits. I remember shooting really good. And in astonishment that I could shoot at 500 yards. It was one of those things. And then we get to graduation, and I want to say I got up to like 125 pounds. I mean, I put on a good amount of weight considering how much physical exhaustion and you know, abuse we were taking. And it was pretty good. It was probably it is the proudest moment. I graduated college, I've graduated, you know, things since then, and nothing has held up to Marine Corps boot camp graduation. It was just one of those things that it's one of the greatest achievements I would say in my life that just helped out so much more in the rest of my life. And it's one of those that if you could do that, you could do anything. Little did I know about the School of Infantry, which I'll talk about that some other time, but that was way physical harder than boot camp. Boot camp, you were guaranteed roughly about 8 hours of sleep. School of Infantry, you weren't guaranteed sleep. You got the weekends off. That's when you could sleep. So all the weight I gained in boot camp, which was needed, I lost it all in the School of Infantry. And then once I got to my other unit after that, I did go to security forces. I did get the greatest duties possible ever, and my enlistments were great. So I will say that, but boot camp, it is no joke. And man, there's so many stories I wish I could say, but it's just, man, it was so long ago, but it's still there's memories. And like I said, I just watched that show on Netflix, and certain things I forgot about and certain things that like kicked back some memories, and I was like, man, I remember that. And wow, it was yeah, it was just whew, yeah. So I wanted to say that if anybody's watching this and thinking about going and you're a scrawny little person like I was, don't even worry about it. If you can mentally do it, that's all that matters. One day at a time, 1 foot forward. It's all you just, like my dad told me before I went, worry about tomorrow. Getting through today and then just worrying about tomorrow. Don't think ahead. And he told me that one saying, if it can't get any worse, it can only get better. If it does get worse, it wasn't as bad as you originally thought, and therefore it can only get better. And that's what I did. I had that in my head the whole time. So when things got horrible, I was like, oh, it can't get any worse in my head, can't get any worse. And then when it did, I was like, okay, it wasn't as bad as I thought. It is worse, and now it can only get better. So you just rinse and repeat. Just every day do that. Get up, do that. I mean, because I tried to not get singled out, and I got singled out because of my size. But I became the house mouse. I got my nickname in boot camp was Mighty Mouse because I could do a lot of pull-ups. I ended up excelling in a lot of things, and even though I was small, I was strong for my size, and it was kind of neat having that. I am thankful though. When I graduated boot camp, the first thing I wanted to do was get my platoon flag with a Mighty Mouse with the Marine Corps flag, and I am so glad I did not do that. I am probably one of the few Marines you'll ever meet that does not have a tattoo. There's a story behind it. I almost got one so close before deployment, and then I didn't want to do it because they said that I'd have to cover it from the sun, and I knew we were going to be in the sun. So when I got back from deployment, I was like, I'm going to get my tattoo. And when I went back, the price had doubled. And those of you that know me know that I'm pretty cheap. So I just did not get it. But that is my boot camp story. There are many like it, but that one is mine. And I only told you small snippets of it, but hopefully it was entertaining. I look back at that time so many times in my mind, and it's just I just can't believe how long ago it's been. And happy 250th birthday, Marines. Semper fidelis, and thank you for watching. Bye. Till next time. Bye. Camera. I'm still waiting for the temperature in my water to be perfect. It's still warming up. And end it there. Thanks.
guys.
I gotta support this shirt because it was a gift. I love it. I do. So thanks again.